A young girl meets with terror when an evil spirit finds its way into her life. I know, we've never heard of that premise before. Hello there, and thank you once again for tuning into RealScreenReviews.com. I am movie critic Nick Iacobucci, and our next movie review is The Possession. This creepy thriller opened in wide release on August 31st, 2012, and it stars one of Hollywood's most underrated actors in Jeffrey Dean Morgan, as well as Kyra Sedgwick and Natasha Calis. This ghost story comes to us from European director Ole Bornedal, the director of both the foreign and domestic versions of Nightwatch and Just Another Love Story from 2007. Now, this story tells of a young girl named M, portrayed by newcomer Natasha Calis. She comes into contact with a very old and antique box which is purchased at a yard sale. Now, soon following comes scares in M's life as well as changes in her behavior. This is when her father needs to step in and enlist the help of his ex-wife and mother of M, and together they try to take matters into their own hands. Before this tale comes to a close, these parents will go to hell and back, pun intended, and will do pretty much whatever it takes to free this curse and evil spirit from the lives of their family. Well, people, The Possession is not a great film by any means, but it isn't the dreadful nonsense that was The Apparition from a couple weeks back. I recently reviewed another movie where I said for everything that is good about it, there was something equally bad about it, and this could easily be classified in the same category. I will begin with the positives and start with the performers in the movie. Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Kyra Sedgwick are both genuine and believable as concerned parents of the possessed child. I have always said that I like Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and he holds his own here just as well. There is another older, non-possessed sister, but both she and Sedgwick really aren't given that much to do. Then Hasidic rapper Matisyahu shows up as the exorcist in this movie and is surprisingly not bad, but unfortunately he's no Max von Sydow. I did, however, really enjoy the performance of the young and central character of M, portrayed by Natasha Calis. She was well above average and at least sits in league with Linda Blair and Harvey Stevens when it comes to cinematically haunted children. The Possession also has a fair amount of quality scares in it as well. The scene with the girl's esophagus that was creepy in the trailer was just as creepy as in the film as well, and the moths were used to great effect also. I felt the film's scariest moment came in a hospital, and the climactic ending also worked for me. Then the musical score was decent, and the piano notes by Anton Sanko were cleverly utilized. I will say, however, that this reminded me very much of the master John Williams, and especially since I got to see Jaws on the big screen just last week. Now, on the flip side, this was toned down to fit the PG-13 rating, and in my opinion, it would have worked much better had they gone for the full rated R rating. Producer Sam Raimi made the Evil Dead films, and those projects never held back on the terror or gore. They were actually very bloody, and why tone it down when we all know that there's actually an audience for this kind of film in particular? I can so easily see the R-rated or unrated version coming out on Blu-ray, and that begs the question from me of why didn't you release that one theatrically? Drawing on that same point, the Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street franchises turned into almost comedic interpretations of their original Fright Fests, but even those were still made for adults and not for fans of the Twilight features. Then where The Possession truly draws on all of its inspiration is from The Omen and especially The Exorcist. These films not only never held back, they were great films helmed by great filmmakers. Richard Donner and Academy Award-winning director William Friedkin oversaw The Omen and The Exorcist to be the best films that they could be and never worried about the targeted demographic during filming, and because of that they reached a wider audience with the finished product. Also, to say that The Possession draws inspiration from The Exorcist would be a gentle euphemism for a toned-down ripoff. It sets up some delivered scares that you see in many horror films, and the cliches not evident in the performances were very noticeable in the story itself. Then the whole based on a true story is really getting older than the horror films from the 70s themselves. I know that they have based this on a published LA Times article from 2004, but most likely the only thing that they had in common was some girl bought a box at a yard sale. The Possession works well in spots, but it doesn't, nor does it even attempt, to bring anything new to the table. The filmmaker's overuse of editing to black really got old, and the film lacks punch and impact when it was most needed. Finally, the director, with his lighting and use of technique, shot the entire film like it appears to take place in a morgue and replaces gore with predictability and a whole lot of screaming. At right around an hour and a half, The Possession is one of those films that if you go with it, you really can have a fun time, but if you don't give it any sort of chance, you'll absolutely hate it. Now, I saw this film with a really good crowd, and that always makes it much easier to have an enjoyable time. I did admire the switch from Catholicism to Judaism, and the special effects were also above average. This movie does have a decent story, it's well put together and well acted, and that's even if it doesn't have the most of original plot lines. With all of the pros and cons, Nick's Real Screen Review is right down the middle with this one with 2 stars out of 4, and that's for the horror and terror known as The Possession. Well, that's all I have time for today. If you've enjoyed this review, please click on the like button and give us a thumbs up, or subscribe if you haven't already. As always, any and all comments are both welcomed and appreciated, and until next time, remember people, I'm not always right, but only when it comes to the movies, and thank you for your attention.